Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ahinie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe mango ni bio adisio. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ahinie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe mango ni bio adisio. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ahinie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe mango ni bio adisio. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ahinie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Yansa bia kwa na le mu mango ni bio adisio. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ti asenie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe obu atentrodo. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ti asenie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe obu atentrodo. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ti asenie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Nasabwe akwa na ne obu atentrodo. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ti asenie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Nasabwe akwa na ne obu atentrodo. Opunwa kwa da bampu biemie. Sia kwa biemie me be kwa ko ahinie. Ahia safa transiona se du trabebio. Kinsolo monya safwe
and we give you all the glory for this gathering, an all-important one, which seeks to bring glory and honor to your name. At this time, I want to thank you, O God, for all that you have done for us especially in this commemorative occasion. I want to thank you for what you have done for Asanteman. I want to thank you for all the leaders you have given to this great nation over the past years that the nation of Asanteman came into existence. We bless your name for our current leader of Asanteman, Otumfuo Osei-Tutu II. We give you all the glory, O God, for the history, a very rich history you've given to Asanteman, even as we've gathered here today to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Sagrenti War, which also coincides with the Silver Jubilee of Otumfuo Osei-Tutu. We commit this symposium and the book launching that we're going to have today before you, committing all facilitators of this great program before you, that your spirit will guide, lead, and direct us, so that this reflective moment will guide us even into the future, a future of hope and prosperity and progress, not only for Asanteman, but for our nation as a whole. We praise and bless you for answering our prayer, because you have asked for this and many more blessings through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Thank you. Please listen.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Champo Chaplain of AMUST. Nanano, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a warm cultural welcome to Asanteman. for a symposium on the 150th anniversary of the Sagrenti War and the launch of the book, History of the Ashanti, by Otumfuo Sir Ashman Prempeh II, as the first in the series of many events marking the silver jubilee of Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, the 16th Asante-Ene and the current occupant of the Golden Stool. Today, we take pride in welcoming sons and daughters who have come from far and near to add their weight to this glorious celebration. Allow me the privilege of acknowledging, especially amongst us, our guest of honor, a son of Asanteman, MP for Kusumche, and the Honorable Minister for Education, the Honorable Dr. Yao Osei Tutu. Asanteman is pleased to welcome her own MP for Malaysia South and Minister for Energy, the Honorable Dr. Matthew Prempeh. We receive with great delight the MP for Tano North, the Minister for Sanitation and Water Resources, the Honorable Frida Prempeh. The Regional Minister joins us in solidarity, the Honorable Simon Osei Mensah. With great joy, we receive the immediate past Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana, His Lordship Justice Kwesi Amin. It is with profound joy that we welcome our keynote speaker, now a son of Asanteman, the Professor Tom McCaskey. He joins us with his lovely wife, Mrs. Lynn Bryden McCaskey. It will be lost on me not to acknowledge Excellencies, members of the diplomatic community, our MPs, MCs, and DCs, Nananum, and esteemed chiefs and queens from Asanteman and beyond, our religious leaders, the moderators and panelists for this morning's symposium, the Vice Chancellor of the KNUST, Professor Mrs. Rita Akusia-Dixon, the Pro-Vice Chancellor, distinguished faculty and staff of the KNUST, and other distinguished members of academia who have come from far and near, captains of industry, heads, teachers, students, and pupils of selected schools, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, we say receive the warm and generous hospitality of Asanteman.
Otumfuo Osei Tutu Asante-Ene, Honorable Ministers of State, Honorable immediate past Chief Justice, Regional Minister, Nananum, Vice Chancellor of the Common University of Science and Technology, my alma mater, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my duty is to welcome you, and since in a traditional setting, saying welcome means Akwaba, I thought that my duty would be done if I just uttered the word Akwaba, and I would then resume my seat. But when Otumfuo is around, you cannot be very brief. You have to go to town and say a few more things. So I'll say a few more things, and if there are a few, just pardon me that there are a few. I speak on behalf of the Otumfuo Osei Tutu II Jubilee Planning Committee. This committee has been put together to celebrate the 20 meritorious, momentous years of Otumfuo's accession to the Golden Stool. By a very happy coincidence, this year, the Silver Jubilee year, also coincides with two seminal events in the annals of Ashanti history. These are the 150 years of the Sagrenti War, the Sagrenti War as we call it in P, the corruption of the word Sagrenti, and also the 100 years of the repatriation of King Nana Prempeh I from Seychelles after 28 years of exile. Now, this function is the first of a series of activities to mark the celebrations, to commemorate the activities as I've enumerated. Taking them in chronological order, the 6th of February was exactly 150 years ago when British forces under Sagrenti invaded Kumasi, looted the palace of precious regalia, and completely burnt Kumasi down, and left the town smoldering after their invasion. This morning, we have assembled an array of eminent people who are knowledgeable in the Ashanti history and customs to regale us with the causes of the war, the cause of the war, and Asante after the war. It is instructive to add that since Otumfuo's enthronement some 25 years ago, the issue of the return of the regalia that was looted by the British has engaged his highest attention, and he has never relented in pursuing this mission and has been knocking the doors of the British establishment with a view to getting them to return their regalia. By a happy coincidence, the British finally have answered our prayers, albeit in some veiled way, that half a loaf, they say, is better than none. However, some of the regalia which were taken to the US are here and going to be here until time and circumstances shall be no more. So, as I said, the jewel in the crown of the celebration will be, first and foremost, the return of the regalia from the US or from America, which will be handed over to Otumfuo the day after tomorrow, on Thursday, at the Kutukudi Deba. And then the return of the regalia at the British Museum and at the British Victoria and Albert Museum on the Akweside Deba, which is slated for the 12th of May. We hope that even if it's a loan, it will be a permanent loan to us. As I said earlier, we have two functions this morning. One is a symposium, and the other is the launching of a book on the history of Asante. As you all know, before the written word was introduced into our educational system or in our culture, the mode of transmitting our history, our values, our culture, and our morals and other things was through the spoken word. In the evening, the old men would assemble the young ones and then tell them about the wars of old, our customs, our traditions, their games, and other things. So it was compulsory for children to attend to these schools. Hence, we call the word Tite Asum. It has been corrupted to Tite Asum, but it means Tite Asum, that is the past resides in the years. However, with the introduction of the written word and calligraphy, the year became less receptive to Tite, and therefore new molds had to be introduced to maintain and retain our history and to transmit it from one generation to the other. We were fortunate to have Otumfuo Admaprempe II Asantehene, the first formally educated Asantehene to ascend the stool in 1931, and through the date of his hard work, was able to restore the Confederacy, which had been disbanded in 1896, in 1935. Immediately upon ascending the stool, he felt that our molds needed to change. So, perhaps our children were going to school, and for that matter, they were not getting the tuition that they deserved and they had to have. He assembled other eminent people, the Safages, the Ike, See Yourselves, the Ake Adimans, and others, to give our history the benefits of being put down in writing, so as to remove the inconsistencies and the contradictions that attend to transmitting history orally. This was indeed a formidable task which lasted several years. And it is a happy coincidence that he had Professor Tom Maskaski, an eminent son of Asante, who though he's been with Ashanti for over 50 years, since he came to Ashanti in 1968. Virtually a year passes without his coming down to us and writing about Ashanti and all our histories and everything. And Professor Maskaski has accepted to edit this book. And this is a veritable history of Ashanti from our own perspectives, without any biases, without any contradictions, and without any enlargements or any diminutions. And the second aspect of the program would be to auction the book. And I'm sure that you have come down with your deep pockets and with your fact-check books so as to give the auction the necessary support that it deserves. I'm sure that those of you who buy at the highest price will have autographed copies by Otumfuo himself. So as I said earlier, I welcome you. I think I've said a few things, and if my view is not enough, I think I'll take leave and then give the floor to our eminent MC to continue the program. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you will enjoy the opportunity. Thank you very much.
These wise and warm words of welcome have set the tone for a long day of reflections, learnings, and insights. Please help me appreciate once again the Jubbie Inning, the Chair of the Council of State, and the Chair of the Silver Jubilee Planning Committee, Nana Otuo-Sribo II. It is for...
Thank you very much, MC. Your Royal Majesty, Otumfuo II, Nana Otuo-Sribo II, the Chairman of the Otumfuo Silver Jubilee Committee, Honorable Minister for Education, Dr. Oseya Odichum, Honorable Minister for Energy, Matthew Boku-Prempe, Nanano Mamaini, Nanano distinguished speakers, VC, the press, ladies and gentlemen, I will accept all protocol. It is normal for such an auspicious occasion to have someone who can ably steer the affairs for the day. It therefore gives me a great pleasure to introduce the chairman of the occasion. Our chairman for this August function is a native of Kumasi. He entered the University of Ghana in 1976 to read law and was called to the bar as a barrister in 1981. He worked at the Attorney General's office for his national service. He was a private legal practitioner and was the president of the Eastern Region Bar Association. He was appointed as a High Court judge in 2002, and because of his hard work, he was promoted to the Court of Appeal just a year after that. In 2008, he was appointed as a Supreme Court judge. He held several positions in the judicial service and other judicial bodies. He was the chairman of the Legal Aid Commission, the chairman of the Council for Law Reporting, the chairman of the Disciplinary Committee of the General Legal Council, and in 2002, he was appointed as the Chief Justice of Ghana. He retired in May 2023, after 21 years of distinguished career on the bench. Aside being an accomplished legal professional, our chairman is also a football enthusiast. No wonder he was elected as the chairman of the FIFA Disciplinary Committee and also became the first African to be elected to occupy one of the FIFA judicial bodies. He is married with 4 children. Please join me with a big applause to welcome our chairman for the occasion in the person of the former Chief Justice, Enim Yeboah. Ladies and gentlemen, your chairman, your audience. Thank you very much.
Your Royal Majesty, the Otunfo Asante, the Honorable Regional Minister, the Honorable Members, the Honorable Ministers of State, the Vice Chancellor, Nanano, Mahini, Abrimpong, the linguist, the Vice Chancellor and the Pro-Vice Chancellor, the members of the academia, herein present, eminent members who are all here as university community. I am indeed honored to be the chairman of this all-important occasion. This is an occasion which marks the 150th anniversary of the Sagrenti War. Some of us just decided to learn history in passing. Unfortunately, we didn't know the inner details of the war, what caused it, and the cause of the war, and as the chairman of the occasion said, the end result for this, our great kingdom. We are here today to take stock of what happened about 150 years ago. If we look at the brochure, we have assembled eminent speakers who have amassed enough knowledge to share with us. History, they say, must be accurate, free from all distortions. It may be told that in narrating history, there are bitter ones which should not be ignored. There are sweeter ones which we should all swallow. At times we have to swallow a bitter pill just to cure ourselves. So my Lord, Nanano, distinguished elders of the Asante Mine, I am here to humbly accept the invitation to be the chairman of this great occasion, and I'm grateful to Otunfo Asante and the chairman of the planning committee for giving me this honor, this great and memorable occasion. So I am here to serve you, and I think you all cooperate and have a fruitful discussion as the history starts to unfold for our consumption. I am grateful and I take this opportunity to thank you once again. Thank you very much.
His Lordship Justice Kwesi Eninyapua is our chairperson for this august occasion. Please, a round of applause. Thank you.
Your Royal Majesty, 2432 Second, Santehene. Now choose report the second Chairman of the Jubilee Planning Committee, Mr. Chairman, Chief Justice Eninyapua, Honorable Minister of Education, Yaosei Edichu, Minister of Energy, Honorable Matthew Poku Prempe, Doctor, Regional Minister of Ashanti, Vice Chancellor of KUST, and unknown distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Allow me a few minutes to introduce our keynote speaker for this landmark symposium on the Sagrenti War. We have with us today no other person than the illustrious and prolific historian, Professor Thomas C. McCaskey, also known as Kwaku McCaskey. He was trying to get close to Kwaku here, too for Kwaku. Well, Professor McCaskey is a professor of Asante History, Center of West African Studies, Birmingham University, United Kingdom, and Professor of History of Africa, School of Oriental and African Studies, London University. He retired in 2011. He first worked in and on Asante in 1968 at a tender age of 22 and was the youngest faculty member in the History Department of the University of Ghana. He spent the whole of his life working, researching, writing, and publishing on Asante. He has written 2 monographs on Asante, State and Society in Pre-Colonial Asante, and Asante Identities, History and Modernity in an African Village. He has also published over 80 papers on Asante, 50 of which have been republished in his Asante Kingdom of Gold, Essays in the History of African Culture. The history of Asante Kings and the whole country itself. Knowing the importance of research done by the committee that was convened by Otumfuo Osei Ajiman Prempe II, which started way back in 1939, he singularly edited the final volumes of the typescripts and manuscripts, which culminated in the final publication of this timeless piece we have with us today, History of Asante by Otumfuo Osei Ajiman Prempe II. His curriculum vitae is replete with anecdotes, and I had a few minutes with him. I asked him what was your best moments in Kumasi. He said when he served as the royal golf caddy for Otumfuo Prempe II. I believe that's where he got a lot of his notes too. Today, his keynote address is on the Sagrenti War and its aftermath and reflections. Please join me to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Kwaku McCaskey.
Nana Otumfuo, Nana Num, distinguished guests, and the public, I'm very honored indeed to make this short presentation about the Sagrenti War. I want to start very quickly with a review of the reign of Kwekadu Adjumani, who died in 1867. The reason I'm doing this is simple. Kwekadu Adjumani was the most pernickety and stickler sort of man when it came to the law. He's known as Kwekadu Anansi, Kwekadu the Wise, he's known as Adjumani Wambro. He was somebody who really enforced the laws of Asante. In the process, he gathered together a great deal of money in gold dust, principally, but also in specie and other things. And I say all this because I want to underline and emphasize something that I think is being overlooked. When Nana Kukudu died in 1867, he left behind a very great deal of money. And I will give you some idea of this. The money was stored in three places. It was stored in the Adakakase, the great chest of the treasury. It was stored in the Asante country palace at Abarasto, and it was stored elsewhere at Breman. The sums involved, I've been able to calculate because we know the dimensions of the Adakakase, and with assistance from members of the British Mint, chemists, engineers, the kind of people who could know about the science of gold and the measurement of gold and all the rest of it. We have calculated that the amount of gold contained in the Adakakase alone at Kwigedou's death was in excess of 400,000 ounces. Now, the 100,000 ounces in 1867 were worth 1.2 million pounds sterling. But you know what's happened to gold in our lifetime. The contemporary, current value of the Adakakase is somewhere over 2 billion pounds. A lot of money. Now he left this money to his successor, Kofi Kakari. And Kofi Kakari was a waster. He distributed money to buy popularity, and he was eventually destoled at the end of the Sagrenti War. I'll come to the war in a moment, but let me simply say that, to underline what I've already said, that the attempt to get back the treasures looted from Kumasi by Sir Garnet Wolseley in 1874 takes no account, because it cannot, of the gold in gold dust and unworked gold that the British must have carried away with them. We don't know about this. Of course we don't know, because it was loot, private loot, and so it is separate from the cultural artifacts that Nana Tufo is trying to retrieve for the Asante man and retrieve for the Republic of Ghana. Now, the war itself is often referred to generally as a colonial war, one of Britain's first colonial wars. But we can refine that a little. We can refine it, in fact, quite a lot. In the 1860s and 1870s, Britain came to realize that it did not have a first-class army. In fact, it was an army composed of people, a lot like in the 18th century, who had bought their commissions. And this had to change, and change it did, and the leader of this change was Sir Garnet Wolseley. Assisted by the War Secretary, Edward Cardwell, he modernized the army, and of course, this didn't mean just modernizing how it was run. It was modernized from the benefits of the Industrial Revolution. And I will name only a couple of things here. The British came to Asante in 1874 to make war, 1873 to make war, with telegraph communications, with people on board the ships who brought the officers to advise them on what Asante was like. In other words, intelligence gathering on a new and unusual scale. They also had with them, and perhaps most crucially, the Snyder rifles. These were the result of revolutionary developments in armaments. And unlike the flintlocks used by the Asante or the muskets used by the Asante, these were very accurate, long-range repeating rifles. The first, or at least one of the first, among modern rifles. So they came, and they came with all this in their baggage and their intentions. Now, Wolseley himself was determined to rise to be head of the British Army, which he eventually did. And he brought with him to Asante a group of officers known as the Wolseley Ring, the Ring of Friends, who would rise with him. So there was a very personal motive in Wolseley fighting this war and being seen to have fought it and won it for himself, for Britain, for Queen Victoria and the rest. And we have proof of this. This was the first war in which the general in command, Wolseley, was accompanied by large numbers of the British press. This war was reported very extensively in England, with jubilation, of course, when Kumasi was taken. Now, the Asante themselves, Kwekadu actually, for the 30 years of its reign, had maintained a hands-off policy towards any of the states south of the Pra and the Europeans. There were no real or significant Asante military ventures south of the Pra in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Kwekadu Agyeman's view of things was that Asante ruled inland itself and its northern dependencies, and the British ruled the whites on the coast. So it was a world vision that really contrasted the two worlds of Africa and Europe. He was the ruler of Africa, and they were the rulers of the south, led by the whites. But of course, this was nothing to do with what Wolseley wanted or what the British government backed. And so, despite the fact that in 1873, the Asante withdrew those military forces he had on the borders of the Pra and southwards into almost Fanti, he withdrew them and tried to make peace with the British. Wolseley absolutely refused. There is no other word for it. He turned him down flat because Wolseley and the British government were determined to have their war. Now you can imagine the kind of propaganda that was put about by the British about Asante. A savage despotism, blood running in the streets, endless sacrifices, barbarians, racism in short, and very highly developed Victorian racism. So Wolseley crossed the Pra and went to Kumasi. Now, one of the things that's almost never noticed about the occupation is that he was only there for a couple of days. He was frightened that the Asante would counterattack. He was frightened that the army he led would come down with tropical diseases. And so, having secured his victory, he scurried back to the coast very, very quickly, stopping only at Flomina, where he sent to enforce a treaty he had drawn up with the Asante Kokakari. The treaty was a treaty of, and you may, I would like to laugh at this point, the treaty was a treaty of permanent peace between Britain and Asante. And he asked that Kokakari, as a sign of goodwill, hand over 50,000 ounces of gold to show his good faith. He never did that, but that's another story. Now, in the occupation of Kumasi, the place was, as previous speakers have said to you, the city was burned and comprehensively looted. The Aban, the big story building constructed by Asante Symposium in Kutwami in 1819-22, the King's Own Palace, they were all ransacked by the British. Now, I told you the amount of gold that was floating about Asante at this time in dust. We have no account of it. Soldiers just filled their pockets or took it away in little wrappings and things like that. So we just do not know about that, but we do know about the cultural treasures. And I just want to mention two of them in passing. and they're simply this. In the Wellcome collection, the foundation in London, there is the largest gold mask known from sub-Saharan Africa. It is a portrait of the Bandahini Warosa, defeated and killed by the Asantehene Kwango in the 1760s, and it weighs over 2 kilos. Its current value in gold alone, never mind its aesthetic value, its cultural value, its value in gold alone is over £80,000 sterling. The other piece of loot that I want to particularly emphasize is not taken in 1874. It was taken in 1896 when the British returned and arrested Asantehene Prempeh. Now, you would think this was nothing. Somebody must have just picked it up and taken it away. It was a brass basin called Ayakasi, which was displayed before the Royal Mausoleum in Bantama and was part of the practices of recalling the ancestral monarchs of Asante. It is simply a brass basin, but the British took it away. When Prempeh came back in 1929, he wrote to the British and tried to get this battered brass basin restored. And the British wouldn't give it. And it is still in Britain at the United Services, the Army Museum in London. The war itself had a catastrophic effect on Asante. Catastrophic in the sense that, well, in a number of senses. Above all, it shattered unity. Asante works best when it's united under its king. The British seduced away and led away large numbers of defectors into the Gold Coast colony, and Asante descended into a period of anarchy. Now, you all know this anarchy was at its lowest point, was the civil war that occurred in Asante between 1883 and 1888. There is no doubt at all that the British encouraged resistance to diplomacy, whether by giving arms, which was illegal of course, and which they never talked about publicly, money, or just general support, and above all, refuge to those who opposed the Asante in the Gold Coast colony, which they had established in 1874 after the Sagrenti War. I haven't got much time left, so I will simply cover what is left of the story. In 1892, the British wrote to Asantehene Prempeh first, offering him British protection. That is, that Asante, which he was trying to restore to its former status after the Civil War, that Asante should come under formal British protection. Prempeh simply refused. He said, no, we're an independent kingdom. Not only did he refuse, he sent an embassy to London to underline his point that Asante was an independent kingdom. The embassy spent some time in London, but the British government refused to see it. And while it refused to see it, it was planning a second invasion of Asante. And this occurred as the embassy returned to the coast and the British advanced on Kumasi again in 1896. There, Prempeh was faced by one of the greatest challenges that any Asantehene has faced. Should he fight? Should he not? The solution he came up with is beyond that. He knew that after the Sagrenti War and after the Civil Wars, he knew perfectly well that if the British unleashed their military power now on what was a weakened Asante, people would suffer in enormous numbers. So instead of permitting this to happen, he decided to surrender himself and his mother and various other of his dignitaries of his family to the British, provided they prosecuted no military action in Asante. So he was taken away as a British captive, and the rest of the story you know. He remained on the coast until 1900, and then he was sent to Sierra Leone, and finally to the Seychelles and the Indian Ocean, from which he did not return until 1924. But the Asante themselves had had enough of this. In 1896, when they took Prempeh away, they established a system of direct military informal rule through collaboration as chiefs, people that they had appointed themselves to run the country for them. This only lasted for 4 years because the Asante themselves, ordinary people led by chiefs as well, fostered, created, and fought in military uprising against the British in 1900. This is commonly known as the Gazazuwako because of the heroic behavior of the Chwesiliba, the woman, the Asante. That war ended in the ruthless suppression of the Asante. This time, there was no offer of perpetual peace. There was no offer of friendship. There was simply the fact that Asante was made a British Crown colony in 1901, was given a British governor to rule over it in the absence of the Asante, and in the aftermath of the war, large numbers of people convicted of treason against the British Crown by fighting for Asante in that war were jailed, hanged, or otherwise deported. Now, there's very little else I need to say, except that this is a shameful episode in British history, like most of British history. It is a shameful episode because it was based on industrial might and a racial ideology. The British were never a great continental military power. They did not have large land armies. What they did have and what they assumed was an overseas empire from which they could extract money through trade, preferential rates, and all the rest of it. And Asante was one of the earliest additions across the world to that particular empire. It's often forgotten, and this is my final remark here, it's often forgotten how short British colonialism was. When I came to Asante, age 22, out of Waham in 1968, I met people who had lived all the way through the British period. They were born before the British came, and they were there when the British left in 1957. So it is time finally to put this episode in the past and to reassert Asante unity under the Asante and go forward into the future. And I encourage most strongly Asante man to pursue further the matter of the restoration of the treasures that were taken in 1874 and taken in 1896. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Royal Highness, Nana Otumfuo Sejuju Abebu, Nana Dwabekuni, Chair of our Silver Jubilee Planning Committee, Nanano, honorable ministers and parliamentarians, the Vice Chancellor, my academic colleagues since I'm in the university, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to stand on all previous protocols which acknowledged our present dignitaries. As Jerry mentioned, my name is Emmanuel Kwekwe Champon. I'm a professor at Harvard. I will briefly give you the context and the format for the symposium, and then I'll sit down. So we are looking at the last quarter of a century, so from about 1874 through the Yasanwa War of 1900-1901. Some of my colleagues may share reflections that might go a little forward than that. We have 4 speakers. So our first speaker will be Tom McCaskey to provide big picture. So we are looking at how the Amantne and the Amantuo fared in this last quarter of the 19th century. So a big view. And then Samuel Edujemfi will come after that and provide a perspective from Kumasi, a cosmopolitan city, a royal city, and the perspective on this last quarter of a century. Then we'll go to Professor Samuel Itemsu, who will look at the missionary factor, both in Sagrenti, going through the annexation in 1896-1900. After all, it was the taking of the Ramsiers and Kune, Bonat, keeping them in Kumasi for 4 years, that incited the sentiments that would lead or feed into Sagrenti War. It is also important to note that as the 1896 expedition came, they were followed by missionaries. So it is not surprising that some of the earliest photographs we have of the submission of Prempeh and his mother are from the archives of the Basel missionaries, because they followed the invasion of 1896. Then we'll go to Eugenia Anderson, and I've been enjoying conversations with her these last few days. I've had the pleasure of being associated with 2 histories by 2 Asante. The first one by Prempeh I, when he was in the Seychelles, and then the present one that we will launch by Prempeh II. In conversations with Eugenia, she challenged me to reflect on what a history of Asante could look like if dictated by an Asante woman, and what that female perspective of Asante could look like. And I think I will sit with that for some time to come. Each speaker will have 12 minutes for opening remarks, maximum 15 minutes. Because they are professors, they are welcome to come to the podium to share their opening reflections. I encourage them to look in my direction, so when I do this, you know you have 3 more minutes, and when I do this, you know you have to stop talking. And since Otumfuo is here, stop talking, you stop talking. After they finish, we will open up for Q&A, and I'll ask the audience to ask me a question. Let it be a question or a very brief comment. We are creating something called Asantepedia, which will be a popular platform online for individuals and families to deposit stories they have from their families between about 1874 and Prempeh I's return in 1924. So if you have good stories, that's where it should be, so that as many people as possible can ask short questions. So that's the format, and I will now invite Tom McCaskey to start us off. So let us welcome Professor Tom.
getting tired of looking at me, I think. But I've been called back to talk a little about what happened to Asante after the Sagrenti War. After the Sagrenti War, Kofi Kakari was de-stooled because he had presided over it in humiliation of the family. The trouble was that his successor on the de-stool was his brother Mensa Bonsu. Now Mensa Bonsu was a man of avaricious, greedy, and vicious temper, and is remembered as such today. He had a low, whispering voice, and if he could not hear you, or you could not hear him, he would find you or punish you. He was that sort of person. And in the conditions that followed the Sagrenti War, he was a tyrant, and he is remembered as such. He died on the Brassens in 1900, and his sons had him disinterred and reburied in Kumasi in 1911, and there was a huge outcry against this happening, but the British allowed it to take place. Well, going back to his reign, he thoroughly alienated almost everybody in Asante, and he began this by invading Juaben in 1875 to, in his view, bring it to heel. The Juaben had fled once before, but they fled this time south again to Koforejo at New Juaben, and they would not return. And this opened the floodgates. Without that unity and the Asante was respected, and he would impose his will and interpret custom properly. Without that, all kinds of conflicts broke out in Asante. Adansi against the Kwai, Mampong against Indonesia, etc., etc., etc. And these are covered enormously in Prempeh II's book, which you'll be very happy to hear. I'm not going to read to you. And he, excuse me, and so these conflicts spread through the When I was introduced, it was mentioned that I had written a book on a Kumasi village between 1850 and 1950. That village is now in Kumasi, it's Adibeba, which belonged to the Manwari school. And in that book, I was able to cite testimonies of people who lived through the Civil War of 1883 to 1888 that were collected in the 1940s. And it was a period of intense deprivation. People starved to death. People were homeless. People were refugees. And meanwhile, the warlords, the Alangini, who had asserted themselves against Mensa Bonsu, descended into a civil war between themselves. The country was in ruins. Kumasi, in the end of the 1880s, was in a terrible condition. An Englishman on his way to Jaman in the Ivory Coast visited it in 1889 and said it was virtually in ruins. It was nothing like it, the way it had been portrayed in the early 19th century by earlier English visitors. And so, Ajimon Prempeh came to the school in 1888 amidst these ruins. And he set about repairing the Asante land, bringing it back together as best he could. And he had some notable successes. An expedition to Incoranza in 1892 brought the Incoranza back into the fold of the Asante land independence. But of course, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Ajimon Prempeh could do nothing about the British. And so, while he was desperately trying to get the Asante land reunited under his authority, the British came, as I mentioned in my first address, the British came to take him away in 1896. Now, in Prempeh II's history, there is an account of the debate that he had with his chiefs about what he was going to do. And he said to them, if we fight, we will all be killed and Asante will be ruled. So I will sacrifice myself as the Asante and go as a prisoner with the British, so that they will not fight here and they will not make the Civil War even worse. So Prempeh was taken away with his mother and his father, Lady Jabini, off to jail in Elmina. And the Asante were not happy with it. They were very unhappy with it indeed, which is why, as I said, that war in 1991, the Yard Asante Market. Now, it is very difficult to compress and to tell you in any detail, in fact I can't, nobody can, the events of that period between 1883, between 1875 and 1900 when Prempeh was taken away. They are immensely complicated, but certain things need to be noted, even if only briefly. Firstly, Prempeh had some notable successes. As I said, in the Carranza and with a number of areas around Kumasi. But he could not stem the tide of disaffection that had been caused by the real sheer anarchy of the war and the brutality inflicted during it. Not only that, but now the British deliberately seduced dissident Asante who were against Prempeh, to come south into the Gold Coast colony, as indeed the Juagan had done in 1875, and there they were given for protection and allowed to plot against the Asante and Prempeh. Now, these are a very significant group of people, and the reason is simple. They were the people that the British relied on as collaborators once they had occupied Kumasi again in 1900 and turned it into a crown colony in 1901. And these people were placed on stools, the senior stools, the Brempeh stools and the Armenian stools, of those who had been deported, ultimately to the Seychelles and the French. Now there's a long and complex history here. Nobody will forget I'm not going to go into it, but let me simply say this. The first 20 years of British rule are really about getting rid of these collaborators. The Asante people themselves would not put up with these people. People like Kwame Wachi and Agoda or Kwame Tua of the Jazz Stool, or the British informant was the Abiyanuama Kwame Tua's brother, who was made Achiabehini by the British. They would not put up with this, and eventually, one way or another, all of these chiefs were removed. But after Prempeh came back in 1924, of course, the British did not in any way countenance him to become ruler again. That had to wait until 1931, when he was reinstated not as a Asante, but as ruler of the Kumasi division, and nothing else. And it took 4 more years of petitioning, of trying to persuade the British to have the Confederacy restored. Now, I'm going to finish by talking about the Confederacy. The Confederacy that the British restored was restored under the precepts of British custom and British law. The principle was decentralization. They would not, for their own political reasons, accord the authority that Kumasi had enjoyed in the pre-colonial period, and they encouraged, if not secession, then forms of independent action by all these armies. And Prempeh II spent most of his long reign between 1931 and 1970, when he was not playing golf, where I was carrying his clothes. He spent most of his long reign trying to restore the oldest of them, the Asante's authority, the Asante's arbitration of custom. And these forms of traditional government back in Asante. And that struggle, I'm going to name no names, but that struggle, as you all know, everybody in this room knows, goes on to this day. I will merely mention, in conclusion, Kumasi. When I first came here in 1968, Kumasi had 100,000 people. Now it's got 4.25 million people. Where is the land? Well, we know that right now, as I speak, land is the biggest issue in Kumasi. And the Asantehene has to defend the Golden Schools' rights in the land in Kumasi, which were taken away by the British and then restored only in part in the 1940s. So, there are still battles to fight here, but I hope their battles will be won. Thank you very much.
His Royal Majesty, Asantehene was 82. Nano, the Vice Chancellor of KMST, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Ministers, and all here present, they understand the existing protocol to proceed. I shall try to sketch my thoughts around the 18th and the 19th century Asante politics. My interests fundamentally will be to focus on Kumasi. One of our sisters, Edwards, who is a PhD candidate from the diaspora, has done something very significant, and I shall use her point on the setting of Kumasi and the palace prior to 1874. The 19th century cosmopolitan city of the Asantehene in Kumasi was a well-built metropolis and economic center covering 1 mile north to the south and 3/4 of a mile in width. The monumental Ahimfi, which is the palace of the Asantehene, was located on a hill in the city center, measuring 1,500,000 square feet and covering 34 acres. The east edge of the imperial residence was the sacred Supreme River. The Supreme River deities and Asantehene's place where you worship Tridiapo. Even to the immediate west, strategically positioned throughout the lush garden landscape of the Asantehene city were elaborately Asante-designed buildings and residences belonging to royal chiefs and courtiers to the king. The Asantehene city in the Edu area was not demarcated by walls like the typical imperial cities. The architecture of the noblemen's houses surrounding the residence, the dense forests, and the Subi River formed an invisible defense against invaders. European surveyors and religious and diplomatic visitors were in awe of the vast forest landscape and the symbolic, aesthetic, and technical beauty of the structures as they entered the city. However, the position of the Asantehene city and surrounding natural and architectural elements was more than what was visible. The imperial metropolis of the Asantehene was layered with spiritual, cultural, and security values to the nation. Indeed, Kumasi represented the traditional political capital of the forest state of Asante, as well as the residence of the Asantehene. The Oyoko royals, all important Kumasi office holders and functionaries, stayed there and performed services associated with the Kumasi court, and their conjugal families resided in Kumasi. Again, it is significant to note that Kumasi was also the cultural capital. In this capacity, the atmosphere of Kumasi was characterized by elegance or sophistication, as initially noted. In fact, in 1874,
the British, led by Sir Kenneth Wolseley, defeated Asante and ransacked Kumasi. The election of Prempeh I as Asante Hene, which began 10 years after the Sagrenti War, was marked by civil war and eventual deportation and exile with key Asante leaders in 1896, first to Sierra Leone and finally to the island of May in Seychelles. British attempts to break Asante and impose their hegemony on Asante did not end with Prempeh's exile. From 1900 to 1901, in the last Asante War of Independence against the British, Asante was defeated and placed under the control of the governor of the Gold Coast. The British then instituted measures and institutions that started the colonization of Kumasi, which they retained as the capital of Asante. May I, as a point of emphasis, say that when you look at the broader community of society of Kumasi, even though we had the Asante Hene with his might and his abilities, the society was equally egalitarian, so that you had members of the community from office holders to those who held no office or position. To that extent, we understand that Asante also had different people crisscrossing. In fact, Kumasi historically was opened up to Hausa, Mande traders and different people from different regions and territories prior to the 18th century and to the 19th century. Kumasi remained an entrepot, so to speak, where different ideas radiated. As a matter of fact, the formation, the founding of Kumasi out of Kwaman, where the Asante Constitution was fully firmed up, gives us a very clear impression about the fact that the Asante Hene and Kwame Frimpong Anoche, Okonfo Anoche, and the eminent chiefs who resided in their specific social and political jurisdiction agreed to that constitution which brought about an Asante Union. An idea that was alien to the European, because the European assumed that the Asante Union came about only through war, and assumed that the Asante Union could be compared to that, for example, of the European kings or monarchs who might have had their territories or spheres through dint of war. As a matter of fact, this constitution, I dare say, and challenge the discussion, ran prior to the Magna Carta. In that respect, its authority was so binding in the sacred stool, the Sikibia. That spirituality is that which was also missing in the minds of the European in many respects. Asante from Kumasi was interested in diplomacy. And so before even war, there will be diplomatic engagements, there will be discussions, there will be emissaries, and this subsisted since the time of Osei Tutu the First, Asante Hene. So the critical question, therefore, is to ask, why didn't the British annex Asante after 1874? Just to jump into other discussions. What had changed on the side of the British by 1800? I know the chair is looking at me, I have more time. The 19th century began with, the reign of, Osei Tutu Kwame Isibe. And we understand that there were a lot of interesting dynamics in terms of diplomacy. In fact, his peaceful relations between the British is well documented. In fact, Kumasi in this period received 3 European missions, which included individuals like William Hyde Cooper in 1816. Then we have Frederick James, Thomas Edward Bowditch, William Hutchinson, and Henry Tegley in 1817, and Joseph Dupuy, Francis Collins, Benjamin Salmon, and David Mills Graves in 1820. So Kumasi was the heart of diplomacy in the territory referred to as Asante and the broader enclaves that it covered. So that is just one example which suffices right. that these diplomatic missions had one goal: to negotiate for peace, to ensure that there was sometimes an uneasy truce between themselves and their neighbors, including the British. So 19th century diplomacy in Kumasi took a rather different form, nature, and approach over a period of time. It was associated with the changing political scene, especially with the growing influence of Europeans at the coast. So diplomacy, which is effectively known in a modern sense, which requires that you have a representation in a territory negotiating for peace among other social, economic, and political dynamics, subsisted within Asante. In fact, from about the 1760s onwards, Kumasi had brought, conquest, and received rent from Christiansborg Castle from the Dutch. But beyond this period, we see that the space between the 1800s, there was negotiations, and also there were ideas of war and diplomacy which subsisted. And some of these, reports have been, perfectly written and documented by the good professor of erudition, McCaskey. Now, the peaceful relations between Asante and the British in the first 2 decades of the century took a different turn. What happened? Why did it take a different turn? Why would Kumasi go to war? We know about Asante interest in Dutch holding at Elmina. We also understand that the interest of the British was to ensure that Asante's control or influence, or better still hegemony, at the coastal regions will be dealt with once and for all. The question is interesting. Why 1874? Why post-1874? And why did the British not annex Asante in 1874? Now, if you look at the account of Ward and Kimberley and the others who have written extensively on that, including Professor McCaskey himself, whom I referred to, it's critical to note that it was an expeditious mission. The team with Wesley arrived in the territory referred to as a colony by January, the end of January. Came as far as to Asante by the 31st of January. By the 6th of January, mission accomplished. They returned through Fomena, where I come from, signed. The treaty was not signed. It was a treaty he would even leave because he would not sign. The story that I found therein has already been shared by Professor McCaskey. Now, you understand that it was an expeditious mission. They returned hurriedly, and it did not suggest to us that they were there to stay. Secondly, the terms of the agreement itself, or the truce itself, or the treaty itself, also suggest a very interesting thing, because it did not tell us that the British wanted to have an emissary or a resident commissioner in Kumasi, and for that matter, Asante. Now, this notwithstanding, you see a disputation, especially when the writes in a later period and argues that the British were interested in supporting Asante. That is why he argues that they will support Adansi breakaway, they will support the Gabon country and all the other countries that were emerging within the state. In fact, if you shift towards Kimball's argument, there is a suggestion that the British had a certain vacillatory approach. They would not get into Kumasi and make any intervention, but they would not also come to fight Asante, even if Asante was plundering itself. In many respects, it is this civil war which persisted in Asante, plus the challenging leadership of Kakari, among other things, that will lead to the depletion of Asante's resources. Two, you would also find that with the depletion of the resources of Asante, the Asante constitution, which they were held together, the social contract, which by Asante constitution allowed the state to use a subtle coercion to get members of the state to go to war, had waned. Leadership challenge with Kakari, the one who followed after him, and also an internecine war a civil war which had eaten into the treasury of Asante. In many respects, some have argued that is what will cause Prempeh the First to capitulate. In many respects, I agree in tutu with my professor with great erudition that through the tact of diplomacy, Prempeh the First would have to save his people from war, because post-1874 and another war just at 1896 would have been too damning and too dangerous for the health and the power of Asante, especially holding it from Kumasi. I will try to just wrap up. I have 1 minute. So, what is my last take on this movement? You would appreciate that by 1900, the British had come to town again. They were successful at that because the rallying call for people to come to fight did not have that kind of zest. And that is written by McCaskey. Asante will regroup, but we see that even when Asante had been defeated, by 1905, Resident Commissioner Fuller had taken over to behave as if he was an Asante Hene. And even when the real Asante Hene had returned, he made him Kumasi Hene, a creation by the British. The intrigues by the outsiders is what Asante has sought to cure and has found a balancing act to sustain the union till now. I rest my case. Thank you.
His Royal Majesty, for the second, Manana Keynote Speaker Professor Thomas McCaskey, Honorable Ministers, clergy, Professor Emmanuel Achampong, esteemed and distinguished scholar of Asante history, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great reverence and gratitude that we gather here today to commemorate the indomitable spirit and unwavering dedication of the people of Asante, who played a pivotal role during the British and Ashanti War of 1874, popularly referred to as the Sagrenti War. As we delve into the annals of history, we also uncover stories of courage, of compassion, and sacrifice that resonate with the Asante nation. My role in this symposium is to discuss the missionary factor in the Sagrenti War. Many scholars such as Eduwaini, Tom McCaskey, Emmanuel Champon, Samuel Obi, Archbishop Sapon, Rastri, Abel Wicks, and many more have handled this very subject with some level of excellence. I stand on their works to discuss the interests of the Basel missionaries in the war. In the words of Njoko, the colonial enterprise and the Christian missionary enterprise together constitute two of the most important historical events that have, for good or bad, considerably shaped the history of Africa, including Ghana. Both defining events occurred almost simultaneously. The colonial enterprise focused on the economic and political dimensions of life in Africa, redrawing the boundaries, reshaping its political arrangements and structure, and considerably looking at different orientations and vital institutions. The missionary enterprise impacted heavily on the religious and cultural landscape of Africa and considerably tinkered with its dominant worldview and value system. A critical revisiting of these two major events, either separately or as twin events, is crucial and indeed unavoidable for our understanding of the British Ashanti War of 1874, popularly referred to as the Sagrenti War. Ashanti and Britain fought several wars.
Those battles were called several names, such as the Battle of Samanko in 1824, Akatamanso in 1826, Sagrenti in 1874, and the Yar Asantua War of 1900 and 1901. Prior to the Sagrenti War, Asante had established itself as a powerful political entity with a strong religious and cultural infrastructure. In spite of its greatness, it still fought more wars. The frequency with which Ashanti battled with her neighbors, including Denjura, Fanti, Bono, Ebe, Gan, Gondia, Tagomba, and many more, will have drawn attention to itself by several observers, especially the British and some missionaries. British administrators seem to have arrived at the conclusion that Asante indeed was a threat to their colonial project. Historians have indicated that some of the wars that were fought between Britain and Asante were in relation to the breach of peace and agreement, and that of 1874 was not an exception. It was born out of the desire to ensure that Asante obeys the peace agreement that it had signed in 1863 not to fight the southern states, and also to end enslavement of people. Achampong, Albert Wilkes, Tudor, Lewin, and several others have indicated that the Asante British War of 1874 had a kind of crushing military defeat on Asante. Asante got demoralized, and of course the foundation of its very stay was shaken. Indeed, the awesome military technology of the British that was deployed was referred to more or less as a total war. Total war because it characterized the sound that was actually coming from the weapons and rifles that were handled by the British. But the question is that if the Sagrenti War was a matter between Britain and British forces and Asante, what triggered the interest of pastoral missionaries in the war? A people that were supposed to spread the gospel. To answer this question, we recast our minds to events in early 1868 and again in 1869 when the kingdom of Anglo and Akwamu around the lower Volta declared war on the Ebe of Krepi. In the ensuing war, Asante soldiers sacked Krepi towns, including Sokode, Enu, Ho, and took along with them missionaries, including Ramsey and his people, Johannes, Kuhn, Smith, Richard, and Pam, Ramsey's maid. We might begin to wonder why an internal war could lead to the capture of missionaries. One needs to understand actions and events of this nature from the complex relationship that had developed between society, church, and the state. The Christian church in the Gold Coast at that time was lumped with other European agencies such as governments and trading firms. The church could hardly be considered by the people in the Gold Coast as an agency with a separate existence. Such was the obvious conclusion to be drawn from missionaries accompanying soldiers on their campaigns and soldiers accompanying missionaries on their mission journeys. There are perfect examples, for example, of Rees, who was accompanied by a soldier up to a Propon from the Danish fort. There's also evidence of free man going to Kumasi accompanied by military officers. As already noted, the first 5 weeks of captivity of Ranzia and his group saw the captives marching at the daily pace of about 30 miles as they journeyed from Krepi towards Kumasi. This was difficult for European captives who had to walk in the scorching heat from the blazing sun and burning houses. In the process, Ramsey's baby had a fever and pulled a deep wound on his heel from heavy chains. Ramsey's son or child died before the captives got to Kumasi in 1870. Their hope of gaining freedom once they got into Kumasi, as they expected, was yet to be realized. The detention dragged on for more than 4 years. In captivity, Ramsey's wife gave birth to a second child. Attempts were made to release the hostages. David Asante of the Basin Mission, in his letter to the captives, highlighted aspects of ransoming operations that had taken place. And I quote, "Twice have we sent messengers to the Ashanti camp offering money for your release, but in vain. I have been sent to Begro on the frontier of Achim to try and come into communication with you as up to the present. We have only heard of reports from you. I give the bearer a pencil, paper, and scissors that you may write or send some of your hair as an assurance that you are still alive in Kumasi." With lack of success on the part of the Basel Christian Mission, the British Colonial Administration for Gold Coast, who now had responsibility for Kriki, took charge to secure the release of the captives. One of the first decisions taken was Britain to take possession of Asante captives on the Gold Coast, including Bofo, Bofo's nephew, whom British officers retrieved from Krobo in 1869. The plot, it seemed, was to swap captives for the Europeans in Kumasi. Hence, in June 1870, the British governor of Cape Coast, John Popo Hensley, released and sent to Kumasi a batch of Asante prisoners seized in a previous Asante war around Achim, with a promise to free more of Asante captives upon the release of missionaries. That was also not successful. At another time, he sent Asantehene a gold-embroidered silk worth about 100 pounds. That also did not help matters. Instead, the demand was for 100 ounces of gold, or about 1,440 pounds for each captive that was being held in Kumasi. To fast forward to 1872, Karkare sent the captives to Promena, south of Asante on the River Pra. And the message to the British administrator was that 1,000 should be paid to Asante agents in Cape Coast per captive so as to seal off the deal. A week later, the captives reached Promena, but before leaving Kumasi, the missionaries had redeemed their 2 African helpers, that is Palmer and his wife Coco, by paying 6 premiums drawn on the Basel Mission account. As the European captives journeyed to the coast, a British force headed in the opposite direction of the Asante army. The 2 armies clashed in 1874. The British forces seized the captives and led them as free men to Cape Coast. It is important to highlight at this stage that the missionary factor played a very significant role in the 1874 war. The capture of the missionaries and the ensuing negotiations allowed the British to plan both in terms of personnel and logistics to be able to launch an attack. Also, the frequent correspondences and spy work and the movement of missionaries such as David Asante enabled enough intelligence report to be gathered on Asante and his forces. Apart from this direct contribution to the war, there were equally important insights that are worthy of note as far as the involvement of missionaries is concerned. The support of missionaries for the war was simply to provide them with a clear form and a direct or indirect way for stability and order in the missionary enterprise in Asante. Since the frequent wars between Asante and the people of the coast proved to be unduly disruptive and even explosive for missionary work. It became evident that after the war, some missionaries, such as Ramsey, had some guaranteed territory for them to be able to carry out their conversion works. The interest of missionaries in the war was also due to the intimate relationship between the formal end of the transatlantic slave trade and the beginning of the Christian missionary enterprise in the Gold Coast.
His Royal Majesty, Nana Otunfo II, Nanano, the Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Academics and Staff of KNUST, the MPs and Ministers of State, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's an honor to stand before you this morning to give my thoughts on war and diplomacy, especially from the perspective of women. There is an Akan proverb which says that Oba Totua Etrebe Made. In 1874, an Elmina-born British envoy, Henry Blanche, made provocative threats to the Asante-Hene, Kofi Kakari and the chiefs during the discussion of the British takeover of all Dutch concessions, including the Elmina Castle. Obviously irritated by this, the Asante-Hema Efiakobi retorted, "I am only a woman, but I will fight the governor with my left hand." These two statements mentioned above provokes an inquiry into an understanding of the place of women in Asante state military structure. How do we reconcile the Asante proverb mentioned with the above statements made by Nana Efiakobi? What specific roles did women play in the Asante military setup? In which ways did religious and cultural beliefs hinder women from full participation in state war machinery? The 18th century were times of state union, expansion, consolidation for the Asante, and a constant feature which facilitated this process was war. Asante embarked on wars for political, economic, and ideological purposes. Analyzing the etymology of Asante, linguists equate the name Asante with war. Kwejo Osei, a known historian, gives two traditions to this effect. The first states that Asante emanates from the name Esan, which simply means war. So it is Asante-4 is the corrupted form of Esa-Enti-4. The second tradition also states that Asante was a vassal of Dedra, and Asante used to supply Dedra with red clay, which was known as Esan, used for building of houses. The people became known as Esante-4, which was corrupted to become Asante-4. It is essential to iterate here, especially joining into the conversation of Edu, who states that war essentially elevated men over women. After the Battle of Eyase, Nana Osei the First divided the states politically into different military duties. There was the Adonting, Trafo, Benkum, Nifa, Chidon, Jase, and the Ankobia. All these positions were occupied by men. Though theoretically, the Ohima, that is the co-ruler of the Ohene, could serve as the head of state in the absence of the king. I am then moving on to look at women in the founding of Asante. It is important to highlight the role played by the female ancestresses in the founding of Asante. The Oyoko tradition indicates that Anchiwenyame and her people descended from the sky near Esiakwa in Achimebuakwa. There is also another tradition which indicates that they descended near Asante Manso. Similar traditions are given by other matric clans, including Nyankopon Bueshia for the Bretu, Aso Bode for the Asuna, Amena Jata for the Asenie, and Sena Fontom for the Ebiana. This explains the matrilineal system and why the genealogical descent is traced through the female line. At the core of the socio-political organization was the Abusuan, headed by the Abusuan Penny and the Oba Penny. The Ohene and Ohima at the highest level of state organization played complementary roles in leadership. The political status was conferred by the Ohima, who also served as the royal genealogist to determine the legitimacy of claims made to any vacant stool. And this accounts for the account proverb, Obana Owo Ohene. We are moving on then to look at women and war. Women played crucial roles in war politics in Asante. Nevertheless, their roles are largely ignored and underrated due to Asante's religio-cultural beliefs attached to war and gender. It is important to emphasize that childbearing women did not engage in frontline warfare, not because of their physical inadequacies, but because of the fear of menstrual contamination. Menstruation inhibited women's political progression because of the cultural beliefs attached to it. Though menstrual blood was considered a source of fertility, menstruating women were considered ceremonially unclean. They could not attend social activities in the community, participate in religious ceremonies, honoring their ancestors, visit the chief's court, or associate with any male government official. Menopausal women, however, were free from these menstrual taboos, enabling them to take part in ritual, social, and political activities. For an Asante menopausal woman, it was significant because it meant a shift from the normal life to become a respectable elder or bapeni. Old women acquired elderly privileges such as the right to cut their hair, the dancing crime, wear their clothes in the male fashion, drink liquor, pour libation, and engage in frontline war. Despite these limitations, women played crucial roles in war in Asante. One of the crucial roles seen is the ritual known as the Mugume. This was a spiritual warfare in which premenopausal and menopausal women performed daily ritual chants, ritual dancing, mimes, and other spiritual performances to enhance the victory of the military in war until the troops returned. These women sometimes pounded empty mortars with pistols as a form of spiritual torture to Asante's enemies. Women also played female captains and the Asafotrema, who were a type of a rear guard. They provided military support services in times such as scouts, carriers, cooks, and provided war logistics. Women provided useful intelligence on strategies and troops of the enemy states. I go ahead to highlight the contribution of three Asante Hema who played very key roles in the history of Asante. These are Efia Kobi, Yecha, and then Yasantua. Efia Kobi's skill in war and diplomacy is seen in her administrative tact, boldness in the era of crisis in Asante. She was also known as a pacifist and a great woman of great shrewdness, who projected the unification of Asante above the love for war. On 20th November 1873, at the gathering of the Asante man in Shiemu, she noted to have said, "From olden times, it has been seen that God fights for Asante if the war is a just one. This one is unjust. I am old now. I lived before Kwebupia, and I have now placed my son on the Asante throne. I do not wish for our ancestors to say my son was the cause of the disturbance of the 60 towns." The council of the military generals superseded hers, leading to the 1874 Sagrenti War with the British, in which Asante was defeated. Nana Kofi Kakari's lack of tact, acumen, and indecision eventually cost him the throne. When Efia Kobi found one of Kofi Kakari's wives wearing the gold ornament used to bury the deceased Queen Mother, she initiated his deposition, and in his place, Mensa Bonsu was appointed as the Asante Hene. So this ties in with what Officer Makaski said earlier, that when he was enthroned, he misused state resources. In this instance, it can be said that she sought to project her self-interest above in the choice of rulers because for the second time she put her own son on the throne. To secure the election of her younger son, Mensa Bonsu, as the next Asantehene, Nana Efiakobi forged alliances with powerful chiefs, including Bantamahene Nana Wua II and Kokofuhene Nana Yaobeko. Nevertheless, her own daughter, Yechan, overthrew and exiled her together with her son, Kakari, in 1884. Efiakobi is remembered for her dedication to maintaining the ascension of her lineage in Asante. I move on then to look at Yechan. Yechan became the greatest rival of Efiakobi as she ousted her own mother in 1884. She was known to be a ruthless ruler. She secured the arrest of Kakari in 1884 and ordered his execution. Over 200 Kakari's kindreds were also annihilated in the process, though eventually he was spared. Unfortunately, Kwekudua II reigned for only 44 days. After his death, Yechan fought for the stool for her son, Prempeh I. Supporters of her opponents, that is, Atrebuana, such as Butuakwa, Ochiame, Jobin, and Samahene Echampongpenny were all executed in the process. This led to a prolonged war of 4 years. Within the period, she assumed the role as a rival ruler of Asante and took possession of the golden stool so that no opponent could be enthroned. In Asante norms and value systems, the accumulation of wealth played a key role in power struggle. Yechan was a wealthy trader who used her money to finance the ambitions of her children. As a known wealthy woman, Yechan deployed her resources liberally. It was known that she bought loyalty using land. She also acquired a large supply of Snider rifles and ammunition to aid her self-ambition. As a result, she was given the title Oba Berma. Yechan remained resolutely opposed to British diplomatic missions, including Griffin, Hodgson, and Maxwell. This explains why she was targeted for exile together with Prempeh I and other prominent chiefs in 1896. She died in Seychelles on 2nd September 1917 at the age of 77. I move on to the last heroine in terms of Asante history, that is Yasantua. Yasantua was a formidable-looking woman who had the slogan, "Men are not pillows for any woman to lean against." Yasantua played a pivotal role in galvanizing the Asante into action by challenging male impotency in a time of national crisis. Echampo and Obey emphasized that her devotion to the golden stool, determination and courage contributed to making the war against the British. When her grandson, Nana Kwesi Afrani Dejesohene, was exiled, together with Prempeh I, by the British, she openly challenged the demands made by Sir Frederick Hodgson for the golden stool. Her devotion for the golden stool and determination contributed to the siege and guerrilla war from April to November 1900. This contributed to her famous statement, "How can a proud and brave people like the Asante sit back and look whilst the white men took away the king and the chiefs and humiliated them with a demand for the golden stool? The golden stool only means money to the white man. They have searched and dug everywhere for it. I shall not pay one prejan to the governor. If you, the chiefs of Asante, are going to behave like cowards and not fight, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarments." For the sake of time, I'll move on to my conclusion. inclusion. Within the broader framework of gender and power relations in Asante, women are highly recognized for their roles played in the continuity of their lineages. Because of the matrilineal structure of the Asante people, which centers on the idea that a woman passes her blood to her offspring, this bestows on women recognized political rights. Several queen mothers did not limit their responsibilities to women and domestic affairs, but played crucial roles to enhance national sovereignty. These queen mothers defied gender stereotyping to shape Asante social and political institutions and prove the capability of women despite the religio-cultural ascribed biological limitations as compared to men. In conclusion, while women serve limited roles in Asante Army due to customary disqualifications and the fear of menstrual taboos, upon reaching menopause, they assumed war politics together with men. As we celebrate the 150 years since the Sagrenti War occurred, it is important that we remember heroines of history, including Efia Kobi, Ya Echa, and Ya Asantua. I guess I will lastly play the devil's advocate here in probing the unsung stories of women. I wonder what the story would have been if these women had told their own stories. Had Ya Santua or Ya Echa been lettered or Western schooled, and had they similar avenues as Nana Ajman Krempe I while in exile, what stories would they have written about women in war? This leaves much to be desired. And I'll end by saying that as women, it bestows on us to go ahead and
gods, ancestors, and spirits live in all of us. And for the next few minutes, I want you to lend your very undivided attention to the Kumasi Cultural Center as they reunite February 1874.
Oh, Akata, also. The British and the Asante signed the Anglo-Asante Peace Treaty of 1831 at Cape Coast Castle. This treaty empowered the British to create the British protected territories on the lands across the River Trap. By 1872, the Danes and the Dutch had sold all their trading forts and castles to the British and left. These lands became protected from any Asante control or encroachment. The British protected territories of the southern states, including Asin, Wassa, Fante, Denfra, Akwamu, Ga, Adangbe, and many others supported the British, serving as their informants. As saw European power on the coast, the British fomented another war against the Asantes. And this is how it all began.
Yura, now say, yes, yeah, no, I did. Aye, and Aroma, so we do all man, my you. What you have got to them now, Mania? You need not done it, and it's another 18, sir. My
Mama Tracy. I'm not the last man. I was in there. In fact, I'm there. When you're around, see Sarah when I say.
Araba, we travel from Nessa. No. Now, what can you do? I attack. Come on,
Aroche. I make a tell. Sabi. Samo. I don't know here. Yet. You put your hand here. I want to make a I want to pass up. I didn't tell myself. I tell you.
Mura. Boto. Me need that. I can see you. I want to one. What's that? I want to be a go to me, no man. What? So we do Papa. We do who put it up to them? I go. No.
It moves out as a burning. I can Papa be in it. Dabi, I am me of Kakabi. I took you a little baby and Messi among.
My lord, the kings from the coastal areas.
Welcome.
And now, them I'm not all see Ozzy or Mark.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you so. Also, some panel.
I'm not a catcher.
What?
So, young good ton of money. What? Me are chimney. Me so I am Fantini. And one also fair danger. But one man, Ebu, a Canada, want to be mechanic. Yet also, yet, some titties are become. Ye hear the set. I'm another. Who is so I've been packed at the Maya and my own piano. Label, young beer. One more as Santiago train for Libby. And woman near them, Papa. I did not yet. I'm not a woman. Yes, Renato. Say, I'm the way I'm buying Kumadia. Some years you have a carriage. Not yes, for the beer. But I will make another mass money.
I'm not a catcher. You have to another year to say. I asked him before. You have done the I say. But who's my son? Pia, you better leave the Achilles. The Nakana and here. So,
informants. And also, they won't give you any secret, anything about their families. In return, they seek for your protection.
Wonderful!
They are seeking for permission to leave.
Please thank them for coming and get them some refreshments.
Yes, my lord. Also, hey, madam.
And you want to say,
Zero.
And the family fair,
Zero.
and yet I won't cry.
Zero.
Kasa, eh, when you know when some say,
Zero.
A free brand, and you are no be. Eh, don't walk up a scope.
Zero.
You know, cry and
Zero.
Sent to a buff for my uncle.
Zero.
Uncle, I can't so simple cry, I won't be.
Zero. Kasa,
your mom shows to cry.
Zero.
And go to ya, I saw the and cry a more thing. Zero. My brother said, the money gap. Sabi employee say, I want to take that and then you say,
Zero.
Then come to me and you so.
Zero.
Tina more, what's your message? You know, Samura, Macano. If you say, I'm for say, I want or Poma and Sama, Wajina, and Tina Mamma took and sat the frame.
Zero. Nana, Madame, I'm with you. Send your yoga like I can was here. What's it? What you are for? I'm all for so go see I'm not letting it go. Above all, you want send your business in Yano. I could not go 1 2 like a person. I'm from here. I'm not a sad crack. I'm a young above all small more comfort. We said, oh, my country, you got said. You got some. You're not the same army. You're not the same army. You're not the same. I want on the casket and a real food. Never go, Kofika can eat you. Salma on a super, that's a Kosia, it's a more. Oh, you're right here, some you miss any period. I said, Mr. Panic on your eye. Let us leave them. If you can say, so friend one, never do money. If he said, a boy, don't or so before the name to Pompa, I will go on one I say.
You're a charming. Madame, Batman, I'm a toss of me, son. Meeting at home. Madame, I see it. Now to your right, I can read Emma. Nanahima, Nana Kaya, I will have so empty. Nanano, what's a person when you prepare for Mada? Now, she can't say it, say a count to me. Yes, sir, Nanano, and children, young flower, and teachers and command now. As if a girl would not. I'm not touching it. Man, so can I Sabah bibi fatalwa. Aya kono. Nenya se dase. Nanano, si e rada na kamen ko ale. Me se, yen ka to atwa be se. Yen ka to.
Bi na kele ho. Je no. Je ba ko bia. Be na ma sare. And many say, Sapuan will never know on Kawa. What finish it now? I was a body, why am I not telling you? I said, India said, Nana must sit the gap. Or do man come out at your chair, you're ready, and yes, Santa Mike, and then an India brand. And Timothy, the idea said, you're not one. You're not one. You're not one.
You're a champion. Adaroma. Mapoko tochi, ana masole. Obati, ama na ko say. Akwasi bro ni ala sa ko chukoko. Na security, ene ni prayer. Ama yewula, onya hini bolo iwulu dia. Me ma mpoko tochi. Ohia kumara na anene. So ma ko ya. Kwasi bro ni. Sabi ba ni say. So ba bi hu na twetwe ya. Wo sa ba Metro, I got a photo. I'm a super I'm a team of potential. So I'm a choir. Matthew was at the I have a trouble. I'm almost there. Yeah. Foli Coco, a charity, and a better. Somewhere welcome. You're a champion. Madame, she managed 2 years, and then I said, Madame, so you can say, about it, in your potato, you won't assume. Say, Yaswas and Queen. Madame, and yes, you would say. Okay. Who said the promise? Yes, sir. Tell your brothers and already come. Madame, let's see what you say. I was going on the say the Buddha. Sabi, you want a seven promise with Madame. Trust. Somebody make a trust. Who's for? Adama Afo Berman Fuex Madama and Tunira and Tunahi Mamma. You never know the Kakasai Yagi. Go home. The hook bomb. Son. No question. Which are waiting now? Skadendra. No possibly the man who said, say, can't wait. If you tell me, son of me. Achane, Mira, my first my wife. I brought another term after about to my father. I was my bad in a mere flow. Manchmal, my budget. You don't know what would you have? You remember? What can't buffers my bar? I'm a wobble. I get one. I was a cocoa. And then to ask them, hey, I am me. If you can, make the punin. Who said, the best channel, you shall
But I thought after so many years of humiliation, they would learn a lesson. I will break their resistance, whether they like it or not.
Governor, the history of these people is full of battle.
See, I received this letter from Her Majesty, the Queen of England. And this is the present situation back in England.
Oh, the London Bridge is falling!
Indeed. I don't like the Ashantis. The war must go on. General Wolseley, what are the preparations so far?
Governor, for this particular war, we're going with heavy armaments and supply rifles. For the first time, we're going to strongly defeat and destroy the Ashanti Empire. Because the Ashantis are powerful. They're a 19 battle. We're training ourselves together. We're going to squinite. Well, the soldiers and introduce the new machine guns to give us a significant technological advantage over the Ashanti army.
Well done, General. Please follow me into the inner chamber.
It was Thursday, 7:30 a.m. as the British had already threatened the Asante Kingdom. Nana Amankweti III and some notable Asante chiefs were the Asante warriors in the thick forest at Afo. The British had indeed decided to fight the Asante. After a full peace resolution led by the Asante Himara, the Asantes tried to resist the oppressor. Asante was the only kingdom that prevented the British from taking their lands. Then, out of the blue moon, Sir Gareth Worsley arrived in the Asante Empire with over 25,000 troops and thousands West Indian and African troops, including Fantes, including David.
Just around you.
capital, Kumasi, was abandoned by the Asantes when the British arrived. Kumasi was demolished by the British with explosives. The harm has already been caused. And it's only time can wipe off memories of this invasion. The British took away cherished treasures, including rolls of books, and as well as the headgear of Nana Kofi Kakari, except the golden stool, Mr. Asikeja. The harm has already been caused. And it is only time that can wipe out this memory. How can we forget the death of our war general, Nana Mankwetia, and some notable chiefs in the hands of the British? How can we forget the death of thousands of people and the agonies of those left behind? How can we forget the parents that rained profusely on that faithful day? How can we forget the treasures that were looted away? But things change with the passage of time. Now Kumasi holds several British citizens and London houses several Asante citizens. The city Ghana sought to destroy is now the repository of Ghana's culture, and hundreds of British nationals, quite ironically, talk in it every year to see the remnants of the very thing they seek to destroy or carry away. The British brought their cannon to the bush, but the bush was stronger than the cannon. Asante was born in battle, nurtured in battle, and sustained in battle. Today, as a proud kingdom, we learn from our defeats and also celebrate our victories. And this is what will forever make the Asante kingdom powerful and mightier. Long live the king of the Asantes, His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei-Tutu. Long live the kingdom of the Asante.
Naturally, this should exude an ovation. I don't have to ask for it. And now, remaining standing, Your Lordship the Chair, Your Royal Majesty, humbly I ask that together let us pay tribute to all our men and women who lost their lives in this great war. For they are a part of an unbroken line of heroes who have borne the heaviest burden of the freedoms we enjoy today. A minute's silence. It's our prayer that the blood, sweat, tears, and toil of our heroes past shall never be in vain. We ask that their souls rest in glory. Amen. A sounding round of applause to celebrate. This book is a man who is in the battle of his life as significant as the Sagrenti War. His is to bequeath for this generation and generations yet unborn an education and an educational system that is functional and fit for purpose. For Santi, we know he will win. I give to you the MP for Busumji, a proud native of Jachi and Ghana's Minister for Education, Dr. Yao Wasei.
His Royal Majesty, the 24 the second, Chairman of this occasion, immediate past Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana, Chairman of the Planning Committee, Nana Ocho Sribo the second, Nanamo Amaikle, Nanamo Vice Chancellor of the University, Care University, Regional Minister, Mayor of Kumasi, Members of Parliament, my colleague, Minister, Energy Minister, Dr. Martin Kukwembe. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed an honor to have been asked to launch this book. Your Royal Majesty, the last time I had a one-on-one meeting with you, I went home and told my mom that I met the king of Ashanti. Then she started jubilating. Yay, me back, I say how to for. So if my mom was alive today, I think if she was to see me on TV, she would say, hey, and then the O2 for book now, I walk down the day. She would have said, today my son is launching a book written by 24 Sergeant Pempe II. Very great day. For me, the MC mentioned and fighting another Sagrenti war to bring about education transformation in our nation. Maybe not exactly Sagrenti war, but what we seek to do is to ensure that we transformed the education system of this nation to ensure we transform the socio-economic institutions of our nation. This is a very fat book even for education minister to read. So I went through some pages and very exciting. In fact, once you start reading, you can't stop. It's filling in the gaps for us, even for those of us who have studied history. All the things that you thought you knew, you're going to find the gaps filled for you. The book is a concise autobiography of the author, Tumfoɔ Sergeant Aprempe II, the 14th Asantehene, overseeing an industrial research committee of 9, which included the likes of Berima Kojo Owusu-Ansah, C.A. Osei, J.W.K. Appiah, I.K. Ajiman, Ohinba Boakye Dankwa, Achimpemi, Edward Owen, George Asafu Ejei, and Chiame Bafo Akoto. The work started in 1939. Unless Atan Yachimatin, another local intellectual, was later added to the research team to prepare the script between 1944 and 1946. To take a little more than half a century, the hard work and dedication of notable historians like Professor Adubuai, Professor Emmanuel Champon, and Professor Makiski, coupled with the added support of Otumfuo Opoku II and Otumfuo Setu II, to discover and compile the original writings and typescripts for finally producing the history of Ashanti. Tumfoɔ Sergeant Aprempe II gives an account of the events preceding his birth when a leopard appeared in Kumasi 3 days before he was born. This earned him the name Kwame Tutu. His other names were Osei Kwame, Osei Tutu, Owusu, as he was known after his baptism into the Wesleyan Methodist Church in 1911. He was called Edward Prembe Owusu. This publication of the history of Ashanti transcends this famous Ashanti saying, "The truth is now known to us all." And the first most educated Asantehene, he placed much emphasis on education as the bedrock to national development and advancement. As a young adolescent, Osei Kwame came to realize that literacy and numeracy furnished by the Western education were indispensable keys to survival and future prosperity. This was before the Sustainable Development Goals Declaration by the United Nations. He was a founding member of the ACOS, the Asante Protocol Union Society, whose objects were about moral, civic, and economic improvement within an Asante nationalist framework. Tumfoɔ gives an account of Asante origins and connections with the biblical 12 tribes of Jacob and their subsequent migration through the Middle East to the present habitation in Asante. Readers are also given extensive details of the reigns of the previous 13 Ashanti kings, from Otumfuo Setu I to Otumfuo Sergeant Aprempe I, and he concludes with a brief note of his reign and the restoration of the Ashanti Confederacy on 31st January 1935, when he proclaimed to Asanteman that unity is strength. There have been many writings about Ashanti history, but the history of Ashanti by Otumfuo Osei Ajiman Aprempe II is the most comprehensive and definitive history of the Ashanti kings, the people of Asanteman, in their dealings with their neighbors in pre-colonial Gold Coast and European colonialists. Students of literature, history, and the arts will find in the history of Ashanti a wealth of material to enrich their knowledge. It will also stimulate research to enrich this volume. It is a must read for all and sundry, and should find its way into every house, library, educational institutions, and bookstores. Tumfoɔ said,
Sir Admiral Prempeh II, consider this publication his greatest wish and is now displayed before us. To get hold, all of us should endeavor to get hold of a copy of this book. See, as I was reading and going through pages, by a sheer act of serendipity, I opened page 81. And here it was. Story. The story reads, talks about Edua Wabin. He was a member of the senior family, and he went to report to Akoseyano Amekomini that he was of the same family as he was, and that he had removed himself from his original town to settle at Odahu. Akoseyano accepted him warmly as a relative and lived happily with him. Eduyabua Krentri used to visit Odahu and then return happily to Amekom. He was a medical man and possessed many efficacious medicines. He was referred to as Edua Wabin, who lived at Odahu. This was the reason that there is now a town called Eduabin. My grandparents are from Eduabin, and from there, they moved to Jackson. So today, as I was reading the book, I come to know more about why the town is called Eduabin. The pages of this review may also read something about your family, about your inheritance, about hope, about aspirations, about loyalty and commitment to a cause bigger than yourself, about patriotism, individuals who are willing to even pay the ultimate price so that their kingdom will survive. This is a book which is a must read, teaches us many lessons as to how you even die for your kingdom, as to how you dedicate yourself to making your kingdom better than you came to find it. There are men and women who have done so many things. I saw stories of commitment, stories of promises made and promises kept, to the extent that a woman who asked that when she passes on, her name should be remembered after she had given up her son. The Otumfuo then made a commitment to her, and consequently, Otumfuo and the subsequent Otumfuos named their children after this woman. Promises made, promises kept. Here is the story of a kingdom that has stood the test of time. Kingdom that has contributed so much to humanity, a kingdom that we have to learn from in order to create a better world, a better nation. 24622. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to do this now. It is my prayer that all of us will pick copies of this book. It's also my prayer that other authors of children's books will begin to take this book and write children's versions of it, so that our children will begin to know more about this great kingdom. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah! Otumfuo, Royal Majesty, the King, and with your permission, I declare the book, History of Ashanti, by Otumfuo Nana Osei Ajiman Prempeh II, duly launched.
Thank you.
And so the Honorable Minister presents the first copy to His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, Asante Hene. A round of applause. Wow, Father. The MP for Minister South, Ghana's Minister for Energy, is doubling all of this, 200,000 cedis. A copy of the book for him, a certificate, and 4 tickets.
Otumfo ose tutu aboto sumienu krobia yi fi asante kotoko hene mama hene ya kono dodo ohene misrew ni bi kasa enweri nananom oman asoafo mrahidwafo abaya kra chimpanyimfo ema ne mema amo ha ene minnuanom nyina yahia ene medi bi se ene eyabakosam ema yenso ewo yebreni so
Ghana cedis. And you know that he's not alone, because his brother, Hossein Kwame Despite, also joins with 100,000 Ghana cedis. A round of applause. We want to come down to the level of everybody, and so we ask that 50,000 and above. Dr. Fred C. Asamoah, CEO of Thomas Executive Head at Power 20,000 Ghana cedis. We say thank you. The Glyco Group, a lot of applause for them too. We come down to 10,000 cedis and above. 10,000 cedis and above.
His Royal Majesty the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and now to support the second. Distinguished guests, please, for the fact that we are far behind time, may I respectfully plead that I stand on the existing protocol. My duty at this time is to make some remarks about what the contributors offered us in the course of the symposium. Starting with Professor Makaski, I must confess that this is the first time I have met somebody outside the jurisdiction who appeared to have unearthed everything about the Ashanti history. Prof, we are very, very indebted for your invaluable contribution. Yes. In fact, you went to town. You got to tell us how the war started, how it ended, and the aftermath of the war. And the fact that they came purposely, some came, especially Sagrenti, he came to enhance his ambition to become the commander of the British Army or whatever. And under the guise of spoils of war, everything that they found was looted. And you even suggested that the Ashanti should take the immediate steps to seek for the return of some of these gold ornaments which are still in the British museums as exhibits taken from the shores of Ghana. Then we came to Professor Edudemfi. He limited himself to the Kumasi as it then was at the time of the war. And that, according to him, it was an egalitarian sort of society. And after the deportation of Prempeh I, the Ashantis had to come to terms with the situation. And that there is a clear misconception on the part of the authors of the Ashanti history in Europe, who thought that the Ashanti Empire spread through conquest. And you made it clear that they adopted a constitution to make the Ashanti nation a confederacy of some sort. And I think all of us drew lessons from it, because personally I was under the misconception that indeed it was through conquest that the empire spread. Now we have to acknowledge your contribution to this area of the history, which has never come to the fore. And you also talk of diplomacy, which promoted the growth of the Ashantis in the 19th century. Then came the Sagrenti War, and according to you, it was just an expeditionary force because they did not come to stay in Kumasi or any part of the Ashanti region. And after the war, they just entered into the treaty and then left till he came back in 1896 to take Otunfo, Prempeh I away to Seychelles. Yes. We are also acknowledging what the third speaker, Professor Ntewusu, also discussed. He came to let us know about the role the missionaries played in the conquest of Ashanti. And that the missionaries were, as he said, some of them were indeed spies for the British Empire. And that when they captured some of them and brought them to Kumasi in captivity, yes, they were there for some time, and there were negotiations for them to be released to also get the Ashanti captives in the coast also released to the Ashantis. And he did mention the name of Ramsey, which name still resonates in the ears of every Ashanti, especially those in the Presbyterian mission. Yes. Then he also came to the fact that after that, the war against the Ashantis became easier because the missionaries themselves were aligned to the British forces to get access to the information with which they can come to have an easy task of destroying the Ashanti Empire. We are also heavily indebted to the last speaker, Eugenia Anderson. She dwelt on the specific roles of women in the Ashanti Kingdom, and she went forward to mention the three famous names, and I will come down to it. He started to trace the succession in the Ashanti Kingdom through females, and that he said that even in water, they also have specific roles to play, but they have not been acknowledged by the writers. And she is a historian, and I think she has done an in-depth research and has come to recognize that some of them stayed behind, some of them were also at the forefront, carrying ammunitions and the rest to provide support services for the military. And he also did say something about the fact that those women, when at that time were in their menstrual periods, they were seen as a taboo, especially in performance of certain traditional duties, and that those who had passed who had the menopause were playing active roles and could perform several services which the others had denied. Indeed, he mentioned the name of Yacha as the greatest, one of the greatest queen mothers of the Ashanti Kingdom, and then Yasantiwa and Efuakubi as the renowned queen mothers of the Ashanti. And indeed, she quoted what Yasantiwa said, that men are not pillows for anybody to live against. And that it was Yasantiwa whose allegiance to the golden stool marshaled all the forces, and for the first time in the history of Ashanti, the expedition to go and fight the British was led by her. And with that, we've come to the end of it. I think we've learned so much from all the various speakers. And some of us are better off. Indeed, we've been scratching history till today, that we've been taught how everything started and ended, and that all of them concluded that after the war, Ashantis came back to get united, and now we are seeing that the time has come for us to have this 150th anniversary as a remembrance day to commemorate whatever went wrong in the history of Ashantis. With that, I take this opportunity to thank the various speakers for what you've done, and on behalf of myself, the Otunfo, the planning committee, yes, we are very, very grateful to you. We are heavily indebted for your contribution to the Ashanti history, and posterity will certainly reward you. Thank you very much.
His Lordship, Justice Kwesi Ninimbwa, immediate past Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. Please help me thank him. To thank you, Your Lordship, the Chair. Otunfo Akonfrehene, Nana Akwesi Adeye.
Your Majesty, Eja Otunfo Osei Tutu II, Asante, in whom I'm well pleased. That's it, brother. Joseph Bonifique, Nana Gabini, the chairman of the planning committee. My Lord Chief Justice, I continue to call the Chief Justice, because once the Chief Justice, you're always the Chief Justice. My Lord Chief Justice, Eningebwa, Vice Chancellor, Regional Minister, Professor Tom McCaskey, Professor Chapel, and the rest of the panel. Nanam, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me as a son of Otunfo outside my great ministry to be given the honor to give the vote of thanks for such an auspicious occasion. But fortunately for me,
The Lord Chief Justice has done my work for me by literally summing up what each one of the panelists said. So I sat down quietly and said, what then should I do? I said, throughout the whole of this morning, not many people will go away knowing who my father or 2-4 outside my umbrella was. So the question is, who was the 2-4 outside my umbrella? Who was he? He was the 14th Asante. He was born in 1892, 4 years before his uncle, Nana Ajibampembe first, was exiled to the Seychelles. Therefore, he could not have known or seen much of his uncle before he was exiled. But amazing. The numbers 39 and 78 form a greater part of his life. At the age of 39, he became a Santini in 1981. 39 years later, he died as a Santini at the age of 78. Now, we are told in this book that the book started in 1939 and got completed around about 1946, which means here we are in 2024, from 1946, exactly 78 years. So 39 years before he became king, 39 years on the tomb, he died. It's taking 78 years for a book that he published, that he wrote, or supervised to be published. Those of us who were privileged to be his children, and he had 21 of us, 11 male and 10 female. By the time of his death, each one of us was alive. Each one of his 21 children was alive by the time he died. Now, as I speak to you, we have become an endangered species with only 4 male and 3 females surviving. He must continue to fight, and therefore he sacrificed himself and allowed himself to be captured by the British and left the British land. So by the time my father came on the throne, he followed his uncle's footsteps and said, no, I will not go to war, but I'll turn the swords of my ancestors into pens and stepstools. How did he do that? He presided over the establishment of so many of the schools that were subsidized in Ghana. Primary schools, primary boys schools, primary girls schools. And then also, this very university here, but let me finish with this. In honor of my father, I have 6 children and 16 grandchildren. I'm paying 100,000 to make sure that each of my child and grandchild has a copy of this book. Thank you.
Please, a resounding round of applause for a celebration of a legacy well handed down. Nana Kwesiapeye is the son of the author of this book. Please, a round of applause. What we built is testament of the human spirit of Asante man, one of respect, one of community, one of progress and prosperity. Let us leave this place emboldened and encouraged by the example of our forebears, knowing very well that we are a proud and resilient people based on our values and our principles. And no matter the odds, we rise to receive the blessings of God Almighty, after which we shall take some momentous photographs. Let's receive the chaplain of the KNUST, the Reverend Dr. Achampong.
We started this program in your name and by your grace. You have been with us, you guided us, you've enabled us, especially all those who have to facilitate this program in one way or the other, making it so refreshing, enlightening us and refreshing our memories and helping us to come to terms and appreciate the rich history that our forebears have bequeathed to us. We pray that you help us all as individuals and even as a kingdom to learn from all the virtues that our forefathers, parents left for us. We thank you for the silver jubilee of Otumfuo's accession to the throne, and we thank you for all the activities and programs that have been lined up. We pray that your Spirit will continue to lead and guide us so that throughout the year we'll have a successful and blissful celebration to the glory of your name. As we depart from here, may you lead, guide, and protect us. Take us safely to our various destinations, and we'll continue to praise and bless your name. This and many more blessings we ask through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Humbly, I invite His Royal Majesty in the company of His Lordship the Chair, together with at the back of the auditorium for all our invited guests. We encourage you to please make your way to the back.
Papa, the Papa, Biemie, Sapa Biemie, Papa, Hinier. I am a photo, I said to travel you. Kinsolabonia, a fair man, already do this year. Papa, the Papa Biemie, Sapa Biemie, Papa, Hinier. I am a photo, I said to travel you. Kinsolabonia, a fair man, already do this year. Papa, the Papa Biemie, Sapa Biemie, Papa, Hinier. I think as a photo, I said to travel you. Kinsolabonia, a fair man, already do this year. Papa, the Papa Biemie, Sapa Biemie, Papa, Hinier. I think as a photo, I said to travel you. And so we are one on the woman already do this year. Papa, the Papa Biemie, Sapa.